The changes in the education sector, the way we assess students, the rise of digitalization and artificial intelligence, the changes in the learning environment, and many other unusual and controversial questions. We will be examining them one after the other in this channel. My name is Daniel Wiśniewski, and this is Education Chapter. Welcome to Education Chapter. My name is Daniel Wiśniewski, and today it's a historic moment for our channel. It's historic for two reasons. First of all, we are actually organizing this recording within the framework of the European Educational Leadership Week, which is taking place from the 12th to the 16th of February, right now. Second reason why is it so historic is because this is the first recording we are doing with participation of the public. And therefore, today is slightly different than usual. We will do a small recording, first of all, and we'll have a discussion. But you can actually participate in this recording by asking questions. We're going to be collecting questions in the chat, and some of them, as long as time provides and allows us to do this, we will be asking them to the speaker. And we have a very amazing speaker here today, André Thomas, who, well, we discussed a little bit before, who is, first of all, a lifelong learner, has been learning his entire life, who has been working in the movie industry in Hollywood, who has been a chief of graphics at EA Sports football division, and after all this, decided to join education. He is now a professor at Lausanne University of Applied Sciences in Switzerland. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation, André.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
André, you're the expert in games. You're an expert in video games. And so now my challenge, myself being a parent, I'm a parent of 5 kids. And as a result, I'm quite worried about having my kids in front of screens and using all kinds of digital tools in general. So my first question will be provocative to you. Why would you actually use video games for learning?
But the short answer, why wouldn't you? Video games is a medium, just like any other medium, like radio, television, books, newspapers, comics. And so as a medium, just like any other medium, it can be used to educate. You cannot play any video game or any board game or any card game without learning, because you have to learn how to play the actual game. So right there, learning already happens when you start playing. The next thing in our educational experience, in our educational journey, when we, being born to retire, we start off actually learning through play as little children. And in pre-kindergarten, in kindergarten, it's only when we come to school and formal education that the play is being taken out, and now we're putting students in rows of seats. Now, you mentioned something about being fearful of your children using the medium and what that might do. And I heard that quite a lot. It's not a new thing. In the 17th, 18th century, there was a big outcry where all over the media, people were complaining, oh my God, what is going to come of our women and our wives? This is outrageous, because a new media was released. Romance novels hit the market for the first time, and oh my God, that was the end of civilization as we know it, according to the media. 200 years later, I think we're okay. So if you look back in history, we're going to see that time and time again. When radio came out, when television came out, I remember my parents, oh my God, you're watching too much television. You're going to be an idiot, not going to be useful, and so on. Excuse my language, all of those things. So those fears are natural. They're part of the human existence. It doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention for overuse of any medium. but we shouldn't also, exaggerate and take it too far out into the wild.
Okay, I will follow up on this question though, because I'm going to be provoking you even more. So, look, is there really any evidence that this medium can actually help learning, first of all? And second of all, I mean, I think to some degree this fear is actually justified. In 1990s we did not have internet. There was internet, but not in every country, and the internet was not of such a quality that you could actually use it as TV. Nowadays, back then we were having the television, and one of the fears that the parents have is if I'm going to actually allow my kids to be exposed to so much digital whatever games or stuff like this, I can actually jeopardize their physical activity, their other parts of life, which are their, let's say, social skills and so on. So how would you respond to that? Is there any evidence that it actually enhances learning, first of all? And to what extent we can use it in order to make sure that this negative consequences do not occur?
Well, so first I'm going to address your question regarding the evidence. Yes, there is plenty of evidence. Research studies go back to the 70s. When the first video game was used in public school in 1971. In fact, Oregon Trail was used in school. That was before video games were even a thing, in the consumer world. It's 1972, a year later, when Pong came out and started the video game industry. So games have been used in the classroom, and the research on the efficacy of the games is also there across all subjects, if that's mathematics, biology, chemistry, literature, English, writing, science. And of course, there's also soft skills like communication in modern games where you can have multiple people playing together, communication skills, leadership skills, team building skills, and so on, that are really challenging to teach sometimes in a formal classroom environment. Now, of course, there is the whole notion that many people unfortunately still believe is, oh, video games are bad for you. They will, make you dumb, perhaps. There's something, a waste of time. You should do that. Well, is that really true? So first off, there's no evidence that that is actually the case. There's no linkage between video games and violence, for example. That's, and has been in the media a few years ago, the big outcry, oh, too much video games, people getting more violent. There's actually no evidence of that. It's like saying, oh my God, the kids are watching too much action movies. Now they're driving around, killing people, Grand Theft Auto style or something. There's also no linkage there. It's the same thing. It's a medium, and it ultimately comes down to how a medium is being used. If that's educational games or entertainment games, which can also be used in the classroom, it comes down to the teacher and to the parents to have a conversation with the students about what it is we're doing. Remember, it's just a tool, just like any other tool. It's not by itself, but it's a tool that's to be used, and any tool can be used for good or for bad things. And so I like to believe in that as human beings, we can use good tools for good advantages. I give you an example. We've created a game for one of our faculties at Texas A&M when I was still at the university there, for her art history classes. And in the game, the player becomes a banker, a Medici banker, and makes decisions about art patronage, dealing with the church, dealing with other merchants, dealing with the city. And so I ask you, what is better? Reading about the relationship between art and religion, hearing somebody talk about it, watching a movie on it, or actually experiencing it yourself and living it through the eyes of the people that came before us? Well, I mean, the evidence is pretty clear that going through the experience yourself is the highest educational value. And there's very, very few things that can actually allow us to do so. We don't have time travel yet, so we can't transport you back, but video games is a really good way of actually allowing you to experience events that haven't.
Okay, let me turn down the table a little bit
Yes.
here. So, okay, let's assume that you're right. The recent PISA results, who have just been out, what is it, December last year, they have shown a certain decrease in the basic skills. To some degree, here in Brussels, we kind of blame the COVID. The challenge, however, is that most of these negative trends actually started before that. And therefore, there's an entire discussion about, digitalization in school, whether it actually is positive or not. And well, I had another chat within the education chapter with Rodrigo Melo. It will be published soon. Rodrigo Melo is an expert from Portugal. He's a professor as well. And he told me one of the reasons why we actually have those downtrends was really related to the fact that the school is obsolete to the current kids that we actually have, who have a different span of focus, and they are exposed to digital world itself. So now, coming back to what you're saying, you would actually jump in on there and say, we should not stop them from being exposed to digital. We could actually immerse them into it so they can actually learn better. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. You know, that's the best way of approaching it. Now, there's some things that are, going to have to be done in the natural world that cannot be done in a digital world. You cannot currently, dissect a human or an animal digitally. I mean, you have to actually do it physically, yeah, and so on. So there are certain things but there's digital tools available now for doctors that are assisting them in actually the operating theater. There are digital tools everywhere. I mean, the digital world is all around us. I mean, from your fridge to your car to your computers, your phones. Yes, things have drastically changed. The one thing that hasn't changed, society has drastically changed, especially in the last just 30 years. One thing that hasn't really changed is education. Education is still done in the very same way it was done 200 years ago. A teacher on the front and a student in benches, in rows, looking up to the sage on the stage.
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree with that, Professor. It is time to really look at, are we doing the right thing? And there's conversations abound in educational circles about tests, how useful are tests, standardized tests. And there's pros and cons for having them. But ultimately, what we want to get to is creating lifelong learners, creating citizens that are contributing to society, that are able to help themselves and help each other, and having a positive impact, and are being able to learn, because things are advancing so much on a weekly, monthly, daily basis. We can't teach all of that in school. What we need is students and future citizens that are able to teach themselves as new advances, as new things come out, and are not running away scared. Oh my God, this is terrible. Some new invention came along and, it's all doom and gloom. No, let's look at it. There's positive and negatives, typically with most things.
You mentioned a couple of ideas of what is. So the question is, what can a video game teach you? What is it that you can teach with it, really? You gave us several ideas. You said history class. You said medical doctors. You said what is it? What else? Imagine that you're a salesman, and I mean you are an owner and a CEO of a company that is actually using gaming for learning. So you have a product and you have to sell it to me. I'm a teacher, okay, and I'm an old-fashioned teacher. I like the chalk, I like the whiteboards, and I like my PowerPoint. Okay, so you have to sell your product. What can you teach my kids?
Well, so number one, if you're that kind of teacher, I'm not going to even try to have the conversation, because there's almost nothing that I can say that will convince you that any other methods than the method you've been using is better for your students. And part of the reason we see this decline in PISA results is because, unfortunately, we still have teachers out there that are believing in the methods they've been using for 20 years. And with that said, we also have educational schools that preparing teachers to go into service that are teaching in these old methods. So the teachers are learning how to teach in an old way and then going into the classroom, and that gets instilled over a long period of time. Now, going back to your first question, what can you teach with video games? Well, anything. Really, I have yet to come across a subject that could not be taught using a game. It's like asking the question, what can you teach with a book? Well, I mean, give me a subject you can't teach with a book. Remember, the books as games are just tools. Now, of course, you shouldn't run off and make a game for something that's really easy for students. Because the effort, the cost and time involved in making a game is quite significant. And for something that comes easy to students, that effort is not really warranted. It's better if you make a game for subjects or concepts, processes that students really struggle with. For example, calculus. And over 40% of students fail calculus in Europe and in the US. And if you fail calculus, well, there's no STEM degree in your future. You're automatically excluded. So it's better to make a game, go through the costs, the investment, time, and money to do a game for more complicated subjects, things that students have struggled with. And the more complex a subject, the better a game actually becomes in explaining it and breaking it down into simple to understand things, and then slowly build up until the player or the student grasps the full complexity.
You see, a few weeks back, I also interviewed a professor from Nepal. You can also find it on the Education Charter channel. And he told me that they are actually teaching math to kids in the market. They bring them to a market and they kind of show them differences of prices and why they explain them why these differences of prices, that there are certain products that are more expensive and there are certain products that are less expensive, and they are even explain to them what is the concept of fraud, which is like the fact that, well, certain things are actually overpriced, and why is that so? So indeed, you can have all kinds of learning environments to teach people mathematics. You can also have all kinds of places like in the garden. You can measure the amount of water you need to put to water the plant, for instance. I don't know. Gaming is, of course, one thing. Now, my question is, coming back to the main stakeholders. I'm a parent. How do parents and teachers respond to using video games in schools and in learning in general? My guess is that it's a difficult discussion. So first of all, how do they really respond? And second of all, how do you actually convince them?
Well, of course, I mean, it's a very difficult discussion because, again, going back to, many people believe video games are a waste of time and not really useful. So that's, first you gotta overcome that hurdle and, convince somebody that they're not. There's games for science, there's games for health, there's games for education, there's documentary games, history games. I mean, we have all different kinds of games, the same way as we have all different kinds of movies. Yes, there are games where you shoot aliens and zombies, but that's a small fraction. I mean, there's thousands of games released every year. The same way with books. If you're just looking at, well, I'm looking at science fiction books. How can a science fiction book help? Well, it may or may not. But if you look at the spectrum of books, from textbooks, cookbooks, reference books, and so on, and we have the same with games. So first we need to change the language and make people aware games isn't one thing, but it's a whole spectrum, a whole range of different things. And now, let's say your kids are using games, not educational games, they're playing a lot of games where you can start a conversation with them about the games they're playing. If that's a puzzle game, if that's an adventure game, ask them questions, engage them. So what about this alien? Why did they invade? Or why are you shooting them? What kind of gun? And what's the physics behind that? So you can already start having educational conversations about the things that they enjoy. What you don't want to do is tell them, oh, no, you can't play this, you need to play that. So what they're going to do is they're going to pretend to play an educational game, but then go over to their friends and play the shoot 'em up game or adventure game. And so now you lost control over the situation. There are games out there that claim to be accurate to history. You can use them for teaching. If you really look at them, some liberties taken with those accuracies. That doesn't mean you can't use them in the classroom or for education. You can ask the students or players, okay, can you find the inaccuracies? What's wrong with a picture? A very popular game I personally play, Civilization, where you build your own civilization from beginning to, till you launch a rocket into space. And you can ask students, what's wrong with the picture where Russia is located at the same place as Japan and the Aztecs on the map in the same continent at the same time? Yeah, because that's obviously not correct. Well, it doesn't have to be correct. You can use inaccuracies to have these conversations and have students detect, well, here, this is wrong, why is it wrong? Okay, and now we're educating, but using a medium that students and adults, remember, the average video game player is 35, not 15. So it's more adults that are playing video games than teenagers
It's
these
people
days.
of my generation, myself, when I was a child, the computers in my country were kind of emerging. So I'm coming from Poland, and 1990s internet was not something that we would say was of high quality. But we did have video games. I remember I spent my entire childhood playing strategic video games of historic content. I may name one maybe. I used to play Europa Universalis. It's a Swedish
Yes.
game. It's
Yep.
a strategic game about leading a country into war, economics, and diplomacy. And when I talk to you about this, I actually wrote down what this game actually has managed to teach me about strategy and about basic economics, geography. I actually have a perfect recognition of different regions in Europe, different countries in Europe, history, of course, because actually the game was designed in such a way that you are having actual historic events taking place. Also, political geography, so where the countries have been, geopolitics, also how does it really works. So these are all kinds of things I've learned over the time playing just Europa Universalis. So maybe after all, I'm not going to be that negative as I was at the beginning. Now, coming back to the design part of it.
Hold
Yes.
on, one second. One comment to be made here is you learn all of those things without anybody telling you you have to learn this. Here's a textbook, and please remember those things. You learned this by accident, by playing a game, by having fun and enjoying yourself.
Correct. My mother would even say I was enjoying myself too much. But indeed, I spent countless hours on this. Why? And it's interesting because I was spending these hours instead of actually studying. But anyway, let's come back to from the methodological point of view now. Coming back to this, a design of an educational game. What kind of design do you need for this to be actually educational? And it's a question that is maybe quite technical, but can we really use the mainstream games, or do we need to design specific games for them to be educational? What's your opinion on this? That's
that's a great question. And it's not an easy one to answer. So first off, mainstream entertainment games, can you use them? Potentially. Everything starts off with your learning objectives. What is it you're trying to teach? What is it you want the students to master? And so once you have clearly defined learning objectives, then, and that's our process, and I've developed over a dozen educational games now that are being used in classrooms all over the world. We start with a learning objective. Once we have a clearly defined learning objective, then we look, is there a game out there that could help us teach it? Because if there's something already out there, then, let's use it. It's much, much cheaper and faster than building your own. If there isn't, well, you start just like in any other instructional design as you plan your lesson materials. Okay, how would I teach this concept or this procedure, this knowledge to somebody? And then you come up with different options. Typically, we start with a paper design, where we create a paper prototype because it's fast, you can iterate very quickly, and then you can test it. And you can see, okay, is this actually working? Are people responding? Are they learning? And then once you have that, and of course, with that, you also have to figure out, how am I assessing the learning? How do I know that the student actually learned what I want them to learn? Because a book, for example, a textbook doesn't do that. We spoke about earlier, evidence-based, development that's typically happening in educational games. That's not happening when you write a textbook. There are no studies that a textbook is actually teaches anything anywhere in the world.
That is a bold statement. That is a bold statement. To say that books do not teach you anything, and there's no proof of that.
No, I said a textbook. Well, it's a teacher that teaches, not the book. You can read a book, and we all done it. I've read a book and walked away and didn't remember a thing. But it's a teacher that teaches, right? And that's why we always need teacher. Video games or books, whatever medium, VR, AI, they're not going to replace teachers. Teachers are the most important thing in the education system. We need to enable teachers to be aware and use these tools and know how to use them and or design them. And so typically we work with teachers, we work with educational experts, assessment experts together as a team to really design the game, because one person cannot be an expert in everything. I can't be an expert in math and in game design and in assessment and in teaching and in pedagogy. That is really, really difficult. Now tomorrow you want to make a chemistry game. Well, if you're an expert in math, or you're also an expert in chemistry and how to teach chemistry and so on. And there's the different sides of it. Being an expert in a subject doesn't mean you're also able to teach that subject to somebody. I can be a really good expert in something, but a really terrible teacher.
Correct. That's correct. This can actually happen. Andre, I will ask you a question from the audience, if it's okay. So
yes.
We received a number of questions. I have a question here from Belgium, from Alexandre, who says, how can we use video games to work on STEAM subjects? And is there anything we can use video games to raise the awareness of the sustainable development goals and sustainability, probably in general? Is there anything we can do? Is there any game that could show us we could use it for that sake?
Well, I'm not aware of a single game that can do all of it, because Steam is very large, obviously. But there's games for every one of these categories. I mean, we have games for science, we have games for math, games for technology, computer science, and so on. So there's a range of games, the same way as there's a range of other material, videos and books out there that you can use to drive STEAM. What I would recommend is to use a game, and it can be an educational game or it can be an entertainment game, to bring interest and awareness of the concepts of STEAM and get students motivated. Oh wow, this is cool. I want to learn more about this. I want to find out more. How does this work? Shooting somebody to the moon, for example. Kerbal Space Program is one example of that. And so if you use those games to spur conversations rather than have one game teach everything on STEAM, that would be very, very challenging. And of course, Minecraft or Roblox are used very much for all different types of subjects. And there's teacher helping teachers, I believe, websites where you can find lesson plans, where you can find resources for certain games or listings of other games. Unfortunately, today we don't have really one comprehensive place where anybody, any educator can go and see, here's all the games available for a given subject, the research associated with it, and any type of rating. There's pockets here and there, but hopefully we'll change that very soon.
Thank you, Andre. There's one more question I want to ask from the audience here, from Sylvia. Is it true that indeed video games are more used by children, by adults than children? And should it be actually encouraged from the schools from the early age? And if so, from what age?
Oof. So, so yes, it is true. Video games are more used by adults than by children, and so that's based on the Entertainment Software Association in the US. It tracks video game usage on an annual basis. Now, should schools encourage it? I don't know if they should encourage it, but they shouldn't forbid it. And they should incorporate it into their classrooms and work with teachers, provide teachers education on how to incorporate games, how to talk about games, what different types of games out there, and how do I might use it? Because there's different ways of using a game in the classroom. Some of them are really not very effective that we found in our research, for example. At what age should you introduce games? Honestly, I don't know. I mean, that's more a medical question, some for a doctor, maybe a psychologist, because it really comes down to the development of the child. I mean, I've seen children as young as 2, sitting on an iPad, on a tablet, and playing games. Does that help? Does that hurt? Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I've played games myself since I've been very little, and I think I'm okay. I've got no side effects or anything, but I'm not an expert on the development of early children and how much. I would say, just like with anything else, it should be measured. It shouldn't be, don't overuse it. I mean, so I wouldn't put my kid in front of a television or computer or tablet for 12 hours a day. It's like, okay, well, we have 1 hour or whatever is right. And there isn't a formula, oh, this is 1 hour a day, or it's half an hour, or it's 4 hours. It really depends on the environment, on the circumstances, the development of the student at the time. And so I would say, just like anything else, use it measured and pay attention to it, and then you will see the best results.
I have one more question before we close, because we are already over time. What do you think? Is there anything, you're right. You said at the beginning of our conversation, you said the schools didn't change in 200 years. And I think I even heard an anecdote once that, the way we teach hasn't really changed much. We changed the chalk into the whiteboards into PowerPoint presentations, and now we have tablets. But the way we teach, we didn't really change. Is there something in your imagination that can actually transform the way we actually teach? Can it be video games?
Well, it's actually no. It's so, as much as I love video games, and I mean, I'm the biggest supporter of games and games for education, to truly transform education, it's not video games. Because we've had educational video games for the last 50 years. It's not AI, it's not VR, it's no technology, in my opinion. It's teachers. Teachers are going to transform the way we teach. It's the teachers that are educating future teachers, and then the teachers in the classroom that are saying, you know what, I am not going to do it this old-fashioned way. I'm going to try something different. I'm going to, and of course, you got to be careful, because experimenting with students in a classroom, you only have them for 1 semester or for 1 year. And if it goes wrong, well, the students aren't coming back. We can try again. So you have to watch out. But it's the teachers that are going to transform our educational landscape. And for us, the rest of us, we have to help the teachers. We have to enable them. We have to provide them the tools, the means, and the resources, the time, and the respect they deserve for the work they're doing so they can safely transform the classroom to make it look something different than what it is today. That's what I believe.
I think this is a very strong message. Only the teachers can change the teaching. Thank you, André, for this half an hour together. Really was very, very interesting. For our viewers, if you like what you see, subscribe the channel, talk about it, comment on this. I think it's a very interesting talk that we have had. If you are pro or against video games in the classroom, well, I started as being against, and then I realized that I did like video games when I was young. So ultimately, maybe we could at least not forbid it. Once more, thanks a lot for your time. I think it was really a great talk. Thanks a lot, André, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you for having me. Bye.